There's a one-upmanship that's happening until we're there and we're all bare and exposed. But just this year, I was talking about my son, Max. He started school for the first time. And I thought school and me and Max would be like the IKEA lady. It would be like, drop him off, start the car, get me. I've lasted with him for 5 years. You can now have him. And but I realised that it was completely different because the first day I rocked up to school, and we walked in with Max with his beautiful uniform, and Max started school at the same school that I went to 35 years ago. And so I rocked up, and I didn't realise all of those feelings of going to school came rushing and flooding back to me as a mum. And as I stood at the school gate on the first day, guess what? There were people from my class that I went from year 1 to year 12 in, and I had to face them again. And I'm going to have to face them for the next 12 years, and all of those feelings of not enough came rushing back. Just this week on Tuesday, every morning in pre-primary, we sit and we do activities together. So Max and I were doing activities, and then flashed up on the screen, a projector came, and there was all of these numbers and names with the numbers. And quickly, I was like, what's this? And I looked, and it was a chart where they're getting awards by points for good things that they do. And there I was, scan, 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 and I could see the dad next to me, scan, 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 Max. And I looked at him and said, Maximus, 77. And he looked at me and he goes, the name of his child, 73. I'm like, who's above them? We all have these moments where we compare and we don't even realize that we are getting into the trap of it. Where do you find yourself in a comparison trap? Is it your neighbor and their boat? Is it your workplace and the promotions that are coming? Is it school? Is it university? Is it your family and that sister or brother just always seems to get everything that you don't? We all have it. Last year, I read a book by an amazing psychologist, and her name is Brené Brown. And she wrote the book called Daring Greatly. And there's a whole chapter and theme within the book that talks about us not feeling enough and about shame. But what she does is she talks about the culture that we now live in, especially the social media culture, that we have to navigate and we have to parent our children through. And she talks about it being a culture of scarcity. This is what she says. For me and for many of us, our first waking thought of the day is I didn't get enough sleep. And the next one is I don't have enough time. Whether true or not, that thought of not enough occurs to us automatically before we even think to question it. We spend most of the hours and the days of our lives hearing, explaining, complaining, or worrying about what we don't have enough of. We're not thin enough, we're not smart enough, we're not pretty enough, we're not fit enough, educated, or successful. Before we even sit up in bed, before our feet touch the floor, we are already inadequate, we're already behind, we're already losing, and we're already lacking something. And by the time we go to bed at night, our minds are racing with a litany of what we didn't get or what we didn't get done that day. We go to sleep burdened by those thoughts, and we wake up to that reverie of lack. This internal condition of scarcity, this mindset of scarcity, it lives at the very heart of the jealousies, our greed, our prejudice, and our arguments with life. How profound is that chapter from an amazing book? What I find that's most profound about it, it is completely opposite to God's culture. He is an abundant God. He is a more than enough God. He has so much within him that we cannot contain his majesty, his glory, and his beauty. When we believe the lie of our culture that constantly tells us that we don't have enough, that we live in a place of constantly competing and comparing our lives to have more. According to Dove's 2016 Global Beauty and Confidence Report, which was done last year from 10,000 Australian women, only 4% of women who would consider themselves beautiful enough. Only 4%. And then it went on to find that only 20% of Australian women feel confident about their body. We strive, we compete, we compare, and the greatest difficulty that we face is that we can never be enough. I was talking with a psychologist this week about my preparation for this, and she said to me, you know what, on my couch right now, I have men mostly who feel shame about never being able to measure up and to do everything that's required of them. And I have women who sit on my couch who feel afraid that they are not enough. She said it's the greatest theme that I have on my couch right now as a psychologist. Fear, shame. In Luke, there's a beautiful story about two sisters. And I have a sister myself, and we are extremely different in the way that we approach everything. But I sit more on the Martha side of the scale. And my sister Jen, she was here last night. But growing up as sisters, there's so much comparison and competition that comes with being in a family. But I think Martha gets a bit of a bad rap. I think that she's just a mum who's trying to look after people and wrestle and keep the soup going and get the sourdough ready, and she's just trying to keep everything happening. This is what Luke says about Mary and Martha. As they continued their travel, Jesus entered a village, and a woman by the name of Martha, the awesome, welcomed him and made him feel quite at home. She had a sister, Mary, who sat before the master, hanging on every word he said. But Martha was pulled away by all that she had to do in the kitchen. And later she stepped in, interrupting them. Master, don't you care that my sister has abandoned the kitchen to me? Tell her to get off and come and help me. The master said, Martha, dear Martha, you're fussing far too much. You're getting yourself worked up over nothing. One thing is only essential, and Mary has chosen it. It's the main course, and it won't be taken from her. Have you ever felt the juggle, the wrestle, the spinning, when we get worked up into spaces? And one of the best things that we can do is just sit at the feet of Jesus. And we need to find him whispering to us and saying, you are enough. You are enough. You are enough, mum, who's wrestling with her children. You are enough, daughter, who is here with unmet expectations. You are enough, wife, who feels like she cannot keep everything moving and shaking. You are enough, husband, who is trying to make all the bills match and trying to get everything done. You are enough, son, who doesn't feel like he can meet the expectations that are around him. You are enough. We are enough, church. We are enough, and he has gone before us, and he knows, and he is great. 2016 for us as a family was a really difficult year. My husband and myself both had two friends who passed away in their 30s. And we got to the end of 2016, and we have two businesses between us. Charles works full-time as well, and I'm a full-time mum. And we were juggling and mixing and matching and just trying to get everything happening. And we went out on a date for the afternoon, and he said, let's hire a motorbike. And I said, ah! And so we went on the back of the motorbike. And you know what? In the past, in that kind of risky situation, my heart would beat, the hairs on my arms would be flying, my hair would be going crazy, and I'd probably scream at him to slow down. But I sat on the back of the bike that day in Bali, and I felt nothing. I felt nothing. I don't feel afraid. I don't feel joy. I felt nothing. And I realized in the comparison and the competition trap of trying to keep everything juggling and moving that I'd tried to shut down to pain, which also meant that I'd shut down to joy. And as we sat in that cafe and Charles went off looking at motorbikes, I sat there and I wrote these words: to get rid of the hustle and to find my God again. And I wrote this: less technology, more paper. Less shopping and more outdoors. Less clutter, more space. Less rush, more rest. Less consuming, more creating. Less junk, more real food. Less driving, more walking. Less noise, more silence. Less focus on the future and more focus on the present. Less perfection, more grace. And less work and more play. You see, our culture would tell us that balance is what we need. To find ourselves in peace, you need to find balance. But what Romans says is that we're to be in the world but not of the world, and to do that by the transformation of our minds. And that balance is a scientific word that is not achievable. And I realized on that day in Bali that I needed to just shift myself away from Instagram and the filters and everyone else, and I needed to lean a little bit more to outdoors at the beach. And I needed to go less of this and a bit more of that, and less of this and a bit more of that. It's an active rest. It's an active place. And in that active rhythm, I found my God saying to me, "You are enough. Amanda, you are enough." In all of our conversations that we've been having with women from Kin Women, it's been the most amazing journey. And one thing that I hear women often say to me is this statement: there's not enough room. Someone else is already doing that. Someone else has already got that business. Someone else is already doing that in the church. Someone else is doing that in my workplace. There's not enough room. And I love what Colossians says to us about this. It says this: He was supreme in the beginning, and leading the resurrection parade, He is supreme in the end. From the beginning to the end, He's there, towering above everything and everyone. So spacious is He, so roomy, that everything of God finds its proper place in Him without crowding. Not only that, but all the broken and dislocated pieces of the universe, people and things, animals and atoms, get properly fixed and fit together in vibrant harmonies, all because of His death, His blood that poured down from the cross. Do you know what? He is bringing all things together for good for those who love and trust Him. He is at work to bring healing, to bring transformation, to bring answers, to bring miracles, to bring life. He is at work, and He is always at work. You have never been disqualified. You have never been forgotten. He sees everything about you, and there is enough. There is enough. He is an abundant God. He is a gracious God. He is a healing God. He is a powerful God. He is a mighty God, and He is always at work. He is always at work, and there is enough. I love this chapter from Faith Baldwin in her book, and she says this: praying, we usually ask for too much. I know I do. Sometimes we even demand. I think I am learning to ask enough for the moment, not for my whole year, utterly veiled in mystery, not even for the week, the month ahead, but just for today. Jesus said it all when He told us to pray, "Give us this day our daily bread." That bread is not only material, it is spiritual. In asking for it, we ask for a sufficiency of strength, courage, hope, and light. Enough courage for the step ahead, not for the further miles. Enough strength for the immediate task or the ordeal. Enough material gain to enable us to meet our daily obligations. Enough light just to see the path that's right in front of our feet. There is enough, church. In the Psalms, David talks about His word, and it is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. And I think our culture tells us that we should know the 5-step principle to become successful. Put a filter on it, make sure you got yourself all sorted out, successful. Aim, 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 aim. And God says, I will give you enough for today. For today. Imagine if we woke up in the morning and our first thought was this: give us today our daily bread. Not pick up my phone, what's everyone else doing? I'll go get my coffee. Give us today our daily bread. You are enough. There is enough. And most importantly, He is enough. He is enough, church. Do you know what the greatest antidote is to the culture of scarcity that we face and the culture of not enoughness that we face? It's contentment. And what does contentment look like? Often contentment can be a resignation that, okay, God, you're taking your time here. You know, a sit back, oh, well, you know, God, you know, rolled eye emoji. But I think what he's saying is lean in. Lean in. It's an active contemplation. It's a place of active contentment where we're leaning in, and it's an expectation where we're like, come on, God. What are you going to do next? Come on. Come on, God. What are you going to do next? In Philippians, he says this, I've learned by now to be quite content, whatever my circumstances. I'm just as happy with little as with much as with little. And I found the recipe for being happy, whether full or hungry, hands full or hands empty. Whatever I have, wherever I am, I can make it through anything in the one who makes me who I am. He is enough. He is enough for your today, and He is enough for your tomorrow. And He is always at work to bring all things together for good for those who love and trust Him. A couple of years ago, I was on the train going up to Burswood. We live in Rockingham. And so we were catching the train up to the city, and Mum's in the room. Let me tell you a trick. If you go up and down the train line for a couple of hours, your kids can't break anything, and they think it is the best. So we would jump on the train and we would drive up to the city, and I got off at Leederville. And when you get off at Leederville, you walk across this bridge into Leederville, into God's beautiful coffee country. And we walk across the bridge. But as you walk across, there is 4 lanes of 110 traffic going underneath you. And if you have some children with you, it's a big walk, and it's a dangerous walk. But anyway, I walked across and I saw this young woman. She would have been in her 20s. And her hands were white, gripped with fear on the side of the bridge, waiting to go across. And I had my kids and, juggling, and I just looked at her and I said, hey, are you okay? And she just looked back at me and she said, I feel so afraid. And I said to her, okay. Sometimes random things come out of my mouth. I said, do you want to hold my hand? And so I walked on that Thursday morning at 11 o'clock with this random stranger across the bridge. And we didn't say anything. I don't think we wanted to acknowledge what was happening. And we got to 3/4 of the way across, and she could see Leederville now, and she just looked at me and she just said these 3 words, nothing else. She just said, I feel safe now. And then she walked off into her day, and I stood there so profoundly impacted by those 3 words, because I believe that is how God is in our today. He is enough for our today. He is enough for our fear. He is enough for those things that we face. He is enough. He is enough, and He is always at work to bring all things together for good. And you know what? We can be God for each other. We can hold hands with one another and walk one another into those places where we feel afraid, and walk into our tomorrow. As awkward as that may feel, God is always bringing all things together for good for those who love and trust Him. That is the truth. That is the truth. You are enough. There is enough, and He is enough.